Okay, so today we're going to talk about your junior essay journaling assignment. So if you look up here, you'll see it's a 30-point secondary grade, but it's broken up into two parts, 15 points for each part. So this video will go over both part 1 and part 2. However, you're going to submit part 1 and wait for feedback before moving on to part 2. So let's start at the top. We're looking right up here. When analyzing any work, it is important to choose strong text evidence to support our claims. So, for this part of the assignment, reflect and identify several significant moments. All right, now this is something that you should have been thinking about in your reaction paper in your novel. And again, the novel that we are doing is Gatsby. From each of these moments or places in the novel, you will choose text evidence that stood out to you as you read. So essentially, what specifically stood out to you that it became significant? Now, it's up to you to choose meaningful passages. However, you are instructed not to choose the same passages that are found online. Basically, what I'm saying is don't just give me the same exact thing that I'm going to find on SparkNotes or Shmoop or something like that. So, your journal entries. Reader response journals must include a correct MLA citation for the book at the top of the Google document. All right, you're going to see the screenshot below right here. This is how you format it. Where it is italicized, you should italicize, etc. So, if you used an ebook, you must consult the OWL Purdue website for instructions. You could just use what I have here, if you wish. Considering the remote learning period, it's just whatever's going to be easiest. All right, so how to write the reader response journals. What am I actually looking for? Now, underneath the citation, I want you to create a list of 5 or more significant moments that cover the entire book. So you need at least 5, and it does need to cover the entire book. Each entry must begin with an entry number and a short phrase describing the topic of the entry. See example below. And then next, you want to compose a response that provides a brief description of the identifying context and your reaction or your thoughts about the passage. So, below we have an example from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. You'll see up here, I have the MLA citation. So first I need a description of the quote, right? I have the entry number, right? Where it's from, and this right here is what I'm talking about, where you want to give me an idea of what's going on, where in the novel this is happening. Next, we have the quote, all of this. And you'll notice here, I have the MLA style citation. My response. First, context. At this point in the story, the creation or monster has a conversation with his creator. It is the first time we hear the monster speak to Frankenstein about his anguish. It is clear that the creation is self-aware. And then second part, my reflection. When I refer to it as a monster, I label it as scary, inhuman, evil with no possible hope for good. When I refer to it as a creation, I label it as something that is made and has a purpose, an invention that has some beauty. I find the tone, this is the literary device, of this passage surprising, as it is less aggressive. The tone establishes the final line established in the final line offers hope. Now, when you're done this portion, that's what you're going to submit. So you basically need to do what we see here 5 times, and that is going to be your reader response journal. Remember, it was supposed to cover the entire novel, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Now, when we get to part 2, this is supposed to be in the page above. All right, so part 2, the next 15 points. The purpose of this part is to take your reaction a step further into literary analysis. Your goal is to use some, if not all, of the quoted examples in your research paper to support your thesis statement. Before you can do that, you must explicate the quotes, explain how the quotes connect to your main idea, to explore the author's intended meaning. Now, this idea of the author's intended meaning, that is going to develop into your thesis, right? So this is something that you should have a clear idea on after writing the reaction paper, right? You were told or asked to think about what you thought the author's reason for writing was. So now, this part of the assignment may be done in Google Docs or Notability. You will explicate each of the 5 or more passages that you chose for part 1 of the journaling assignment. So I think that you should do this in Notability, and I'll show you below. We're going to explicate a passage together, so you'll see it'll be easier to do in Notability rather than Google Docs, but of course, the choice is yours. Starting here, when using direct quotes in a paper, it is imperative to make clear how that particular example supports your claim. To do that, you need to explicate your quote. To do this properly, we must be both a close reader and a strong writer. Close readers treat analyzing quotes like a puzzle. This is called explicating. You can read the definition. Things to consider. Are there any words that I am unfamiliar with that need to be defined? This is important. If you don't know what a word means, how can you explicate the quote? Are there any verbs or adjectives that seem unusual? They were talking about diction, right? Considering the character being described, what words or phrases seem out of place? More diction, also characterization. Is there anything significant about the syntax of the sentence? That's punctuation, grammar, ordering, how everything's put together. What is the author's tone? Right? And that's the mood that is established. Are there any literary devices? Right? And all this should help contribute to the main idea, which is, what is the author's purpose? Now, as you complete this assignment, pay attention and go line by line in your chosen passage. Ask yourself, what are the author's purpose for including this quote? If I wish to use this in my notes, in my research paper, how do I translate all of this into a way that is clear to my reader? So, the expectation is that this assignment will be completed thoroughly and completely with many annotations throughout. Failure to do so will be a loss of points. And again, you're going to submit this to the Google Classroom page. You can actually ignore this. If you want to submit it as a PDF, I'm totally fine with that. All right, so let's explicate this quote. Now, I entreat you to hear me before you give vent to your hatred of my devoted head. Now, right away, this idea in my devoted head, we have here, the monster is characterizing himself as devoted, right? Or we'll call it the creation. So I'll say the creation sees himself as devoted to Victor. Victor is Victor Frankenstein. He says, have I not suffered enough that you seek to increase my misery? Interesting. Okay, so we had suffer, this idea of increasing misery. All right. Creation feels Victor is essentially hurting him on purpose. And you can even do stuff like this where, match color to color. Next we'll talk, things will be in yellow. Life, although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, is dear to me, and I will defend it. Again, we have this idea that, creation feels pretty bad about himself, right? He says things like miserable, anguish, and this I can even say, diction as the author's word choice is showing us what the monster feels. Okay. Remember, thou hast made me more powerful than thyself, my height superior, my joints more supple. Now this is interesting. Okay, but I will not be tempted to set myself in opposition to thee. Okay. Now here, this is interesting because, the monster, or the creation, I keep calling it the monster. The creation is kind of seemingly tacitly threatening Victor. You made me bigger than you made me stronger than you, but, I won't go after you unless I have to, right? That's kind of what it sounds like to me. And so on and so forth. I am thy creature, and I will even be mild and docile in my natural lord and king, if thou wilt perform thy part, which thou owest me. Interesting. Okay, the creation feels Victor owes him a happy life, right? You made me. It's your job to make sure that you provide for me, that you give me what I need. Frankenstein, he says, be not equitable to every other creature, and trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice and even thy clemency and affection is most due. I would even say that relates to the point, before it. Okay? This, same thing is there. Remember that I am thy creature, I ought to be thy Adam, but rather I am thy fallen angel. Here's something interesting. We have an illusion. Right? I should be your Adam, but instead you treat me like I'm the devil. Everywhere I see bliss for which I am alone irrecoverably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy and I shall be virtuous. Okay, so here. No, the creation. What would I say? The creation knows he's been wicked, but feels he was forced into it. All right, so essentially for each passage, you need to be taking these kind of notes. Now, you don't necessarily have to color code it like I did, and etc. You can make it all typed. You can do it however you want. It just needs to be clear that you have explicated the entire quote. So that will be part 2. And that's all. Let me know if you